Ireland, 1845. Over the next few years, about 2 million people died or were forced to leave Ireland. 1 million people died of starvation. 1 million more fled to America, to Canada, to wherever a ship could carry them. Villages emptied out, fields were abandoned, the language, the culture, and the identity of a nation were buried along with bodies that were never given a proper burial. The cause was not war. It was not an infectious disease. It was not a natural disaster in the way we usually imagine one. The cause was a fungus-like organism that attacked the potato. One organism, one crop, and an entire nation collapsed. If that sounds impossible, remember this: even today, billions of people still depend on a small handful of food crop varieties. The modern global food system is not as far removed as we like to think from the system that collapsed in Ireland 2 centuries ago. But to understand how this happened, how a nation became so dependent on a single crop that losing it meant losing everything, we have to go back to the beginning, to the highest mountains in South America, 8,000 years ago, to a place no one expected could produce one of the most influential crops in human history. This is the history of the potato. The Andes Mountains, southern Peru and northwestern Bolivia, 8,000 years ago. At an altitude of more than 3,000 meters, where the air is thin, temperatures can drop below freezing at night, and almost no other crop can survive, people discovered a bitter wild tuber. They did not give up on it. For thousands of years, Andean farmers systematically selected, bred, and improved these wild tubers. They chose the biggest ones. They chose the least bitter ones. They chose the ones most resistant to cold and drought. The result was the potato. Identifying potatoes in the archaeological record is not easy. Unlike hard, long-lasting wheat grains, a moist potato tuber decomposes quickly. The oldest confirmed potato remains were found at the coastal site of Ancon in central Peru, dated to around 2,500 years before the Common Era. But the potato's influence on Andean culture is far older than that physical evidence. The Moche and Nazca peoples captured the shape of the potato tuber in their pottery, complete with its bumps, ridges, and small distinctive eyes. For Andean societies, the potato was not just food. It was a symbol of life woven into their art and their spirituality. And the potato had one strategic advantage that no other staple crop could claim. It was hidden. This is a detail that is often overlooked in the history of the potato, but it may be the most important reason the potato survived for thousands of years in a region of the Andes that was frequently torn by conflict between rival groups. Imagine you are a soldier attacking a village. You can burn a wheat field. You can raid a rice granary. You can seize every visible food supply, but you cannot seize what is buried underground. The potato does not need to be harvested the moment it ripens. It can be left in the ground for months, like a hidden natural storehouse that cannot be seen from the surface. When the next planting season arrives, or when the danger has passed, farmers simply return and dig it up. Food historian William McNeill called this the potato's tactical advantage, its ability to serve as a food reserve that an enemy could neither detect nor destroy. In a region as uncertain as the Andes, this was not just an advantage. It was the difference between surviving and dying. The Inca Empire later exploited this advantage systematically. They developed a freeze-drying technique called chunyo, which allowed potatoes to be stored for years without spoiling. The process worked like this. Potatoes were left to freeze in the cold night air, then trampled by foot during the day to squeeze out the moisture, then dried in the sun. The result was a set of dense, lightweight blocks that were durable and easy to transport anywhere. The military logistics of the Inca Empire, which governed one of the largest pre-industrial territories in the Americas, relied heavily on chunyo. The potato was not just food, it was military technology. 1532, Francisco Pizarro invaded the Inca Empire. His soldiers encountered the potato for the first time. They had no idea what to make of it. This was not wheat, not grapes, not olives. It was a strange tuber that grew underground, something that in Europe was fed only to pigs and eaten only by the poor who had no other choice. The first potatoes arrived in Spain around 1570. They reached the British Isles sometime between 1588 and 1593. And in Europe, the potato was met with almost universal suspicion. First, the potato was not mentioned in the Bible. This may not sound like a scientific argument today, but in 16th century Europe it was a serious concern. Many people suspected that a plant God never named in Scripture must be carrying something sinister. Second, the potato grew underground. And in Europe at the time, anything that grew below the surface of the earth was associated with the underworld and with things considered unclean. Third, and this was the most concrete concern, the potato belongs to the nightshade family. The same family as poisonous plants like belladonna and henbane. Their flowers really do look alike. And certain parts of the potato, especially the green parts and the sprouts, do contain solanine, a toxin that can be deadly in large amounts. European suspicion was not entirely unfounded. For nearly 2 centuries, the potato was stranded in European botanical gardens as a strange exotic ornamental, eaten by some of the poor who had no other option, rejected by everyone who had a choice. Then everything changed, not because Europeans suddenly recognized the potato's value, but because they ran out of other options. Seventeenth and 18th century Europe was a continent constantly struck by famine. Not the kind of famine we imagine today. A local food shortage lasting a few weeks. This was structural famine, recurring every few years, killing tens of thousands of people each time it struck. Wheat harvests failed because winters ran too long. Bread prices soared, people died in the streets, food riots broke out in cities. And through all of it, the potato just sat in botanical gardens, ignored. Frederick the Great of Prussia was one of the first rulers to seriously try to change this perception. In 1756, he ordered Prussian farmers to plant potatoes as a food reserve. The farmers refused. They did not want to eat, in their words, pig food. Frederick did not argue. He posted guards around the royal potato fields, as if the potato were a priceless treasure that needed protection. The tactic worked. Farmers who once refused to even look at the potato suddenly wanted to know what was being guarded so closely. They began stealing the potatoes and planting them for themselves. This was the psychology of scarcity long before the term ever existed. In France, something similar was done by Antoine Augustin Parmentier, a pharmacist who had once been held as a prisoner of war by Prussia during the 7 Years' War and survived largely on potatoes. He returned to France with one mission: convince his countrymen that the potato was edible. He hosted lavish banquets where every dish was made from potatoes. He invited some of the most influential figures in France, including Benjamin Franklin. He gifted potato flowers to King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who later wore them as ornaments in their hair. Within a matter of years, the potato transformed from pig food into a symbol of modernity. By the end of the 18th century, the 1785 edition of Bon Jardinier noted with enthusiasm, "No vegetable has ever been written about so much or inspired so much excitement." 2 centuries of rejection, then 1 decade of brilliant marketing. And all of Europe changed its mind. The potato did not change the world because of its taste. It changed the world because it could feed more people than almost any other crop Europe had ever known. Once Europe accepted the potato, something extraordinary happened. Quietly, without anyone fully realizing it, Europe's population began to explode. Not because of better medical technology, not because of improved sanitation, not because of wiser government policy, because the potato produced 2 to 3 times more calories than wheat on the same amount of land. Calorie comparison per hectare. 1 hectare of wheat produces roughly 3 million calories. 1 hectare of potatoes produces roughly 8 million calories. Because the potato could grow in soil too poor for wheat. Because the potato contains vitamin C. And that helped reduce the risk of scurvy across many European populations, a disease that had killed sailors and soldiers for centuries. Economists Nathan Nunn and Nancy Chian, in research published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics in 2011, estimated that the adoption of the potato was responsible for roughly 1/4 of Europe's population growth between 1700 and 1900. 1/4. 1 crop, 2 centuries. Hundreds of millions of people who would never have been born without it. And that population growth was not just a statistic. A larger population meant a larger workforce. A larger workforce meant more factories could operate. Steam engines needed coal, but factories needed workers. And workers needed cheap calories. The Industrial Revolution, which reshaped the modern world, was powered in large part by calories that came from a tuber grown underground. A tuber that, 2 centuries earlier, had been considered unfit for human consumption. We return now to Ireland. And this time we have to be honest about what really happened. The Great Irish Famine was not a natural disaster. It was a disaster that could have been predicted and largely could have been prevented. To understand it, we need to understand the political context behind it. Ireland, under British rule, was one of the poorest colonies in Europe. The best land was owned by absentee English landlords. Irish farmers worked the land as tenants, paying high rents and keeping their right to stay only as long as they could pay. Under these conditions, the potato was the only logical choice. The potato produced more calories per hectare than any other crop that could grow on the land available to them. A single family could live an entire year on the potatoes grown on a very small plot. And unlike wheat, which had to be sold to cover rent, potatoes could be eaten directly. For nearly 100 years, millions of Irish people lived almost entirely on potatoes. One variety of potato dominated. It was called the Irish lumper. Because most Irish potatoes came from such a genetically uniform stock, they had almost no natural diversity to defend against disease. In 1845, a fungus-like organism called Phytophthora infestans arrived from North America. It attacked the Irish lumper perfectly. Because the genetic uniformity of Ireland's potatoes meant there was no alternate variety with different resistance able to survive. Once the water mold touched one plant, it spread rapidly to nearly all of them. Within a single season, the potato harvest across most of Ireland was destroyed. And that is when the cruelest decision of all was made. While millions of Irish people were starving, Ireland was still exporting food to England. Wheat, livestock, butter, all of it kept leaving Ireland because English landlords and the British government decided that economic contracts had to be honored, even as people died in the streets. The problem was not that there was no food. The problem was that the people who were starving had no access to it. A natural disaster combined with cold, calculated political policy, the result was one of the deadliest famines in modern history. About 1 million people died. About 1 million more fled. Ireland's population fell sharply and kept declining for decades afterward, a demographic wound that has not fully healed to this day. After the Great Famine, science finally began to take the potato seriously. Scientists developed new, disease-resistant varieties. Modern potato farming became far more genetically diverse, and the potato kept spreading across the world. Today, it is the fourth most important food crop on the planet, after corn, rice, and wheat. In Europe, French fries, in their many forms, became one of the most widely eaten foods in the world. In North America, the potato industry generates tens of billions of dollars every year. In Asia, potato consumption is growing faster than in any other region on Earth. One fact that might surprise you: the world's largest fast food chains alone purchase millions of tons of potatoes every year, far more than most people would ever imagine. But there is a lesson from the Great Famine that we have not fully learned. Today, global potato production still depends heavily on a small handful of commercial varieties. Varieties chosen not because they are the most nutritious or the most disease-resistant, but because they are the most uniform in shape, the easiest for machines to process, the most suitable for long-distance shipping. In the Andes Mountains, local farmers still grow thousands of different potato varieties. Scientists have recorded more than 4,000 known varieties in the world, and most of them originate from the Andes, each with its own unique color, texture, flavor, and resistance. This is a genetic bank built over 8,000 years, and it is slowly disappearing. Because more efficient commercial varieties are replacing local knowledge passed down for thousands of years. The same pattern as nixtamalization. The same pattern as local rice varieties pushed aside by commercial ones. The same pattern repeating itself. 8,000 years ago, someone in the Andes Mountains dug a bitter wild tuber out of frozen ground. They did not give up on it, and the result was a crop that saved millions of lives in Europe, that made the Industrial Revolution possible, and that today feeds billions of people in countless forms. The potato teaches us about the fragility hidden beneath prosperity. Ireland was not poor because it lacked food. Ireland starved because its entire food security system depended on a single point. One crop, one variety, one choice that was never really a choice, because poverty left no other option. And when that single point failed, everything collapsed at once. This is not a lesson about the potato. It is a lesson about the systems we build on top of the potato. Systems that are too efficient for the short term and too fragile for the long term. Civilizations are not built by kings or generals first. They are built by the crops that feed them, and often by the crops that are the easiest to underestimate. In looking at how we manage food today, monocultures growing more uniform, dependence on fewer and fewer varieties, a global distribution system that cannot afford to fail, the question is not whether we could make the same mistake again. The question is when